The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to John. Jesus went across from the Sea of Galilee, and a large crowd followed him, because they saw the signs that he was performing on the sick. Jesus went up on the mountain, and there he sat down with his disciples. The Jewish feast of the Passover was near. When Jesus raised his eyes and saw that a large crowd was coming to him, he said to Philip, "Where can we buy enough food for them to eat?" He said this to test him, because he himself knew that what he was going through. Philip answered him, 200 days' wages worth of food would not be enough for each of them to have just a little. One of his disciples, Andrew, the brother of Simon Peter, said to him, "There is a boy here who has 5 barley loaves and 2 fish. But what good are these for so many?" Jesus said, "Have the people recline." Now there was a great deal of grass in that place, so the men reclined, about 5,000 in number. Then Jesus took the loaves, gave thanks, and distributed them to those who were reclining, and also as much of the fish as they wanted. When they had had their fill, he said to his disciples, "Gather the fragments left over, so that nothing will be wasted." So they collected them and filled 12 wicker baskets with fragments from the 5 barley loaves that had been more than they could eat. When the people saw the sign he had done, they said, "This is truly the prophet, the one who is to come into the world." Since Jesus knew that they were going to come and carry him off to make him king, he withdrew again to the mountain alone. The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
The story we heard today in the Gospel according to John was a part of a collection of 6 similar stories called the feeding of the multitude in the Gospels. If we recall, there are 2 different times when this miracle happened. The one we heard today was more well known because it was the only miracle of Jesus beside the resurrection itself that could be found in all 4 Gospels. The feeding of the 5,000 men with 2 fish and 5 loaves of bread. The other one was the feeding of the 4,000 with 7 loaves of bread and a few fish. This miracle was only found in the Gospels of Mark and Matthew, and that was why it was less mentioned. So for the miracle we heard today, even though all 4 Gospels had it, the Gospel of John got for itself some unique details that convey John's perspective about Jesus. The first thing we could notice is that the location of the miracle was said to be on the other side of the Sea of Galilee, which was in the land of the pagans. This detail implied that Jesus' name was already spread far outside of the Jewish territories. The second thing is that John specifically said the crowd came to Jesus because they saw Jesus' miracles. They didn't come to Jesus for faith. They looked for Jesus for earthly benefits and not for the truth that he was teaching. The third thing is that in the other Gospels, the disciples came to tell Jesus about the issue of the feeding to the crowd. But in the Gospel of John, Jesus himself was aware, and he himself was asking the disciples about the issue. And then in the other Gospels, Jesus asked his disciples to distribute the bread and the fish to the people. But in the Gospel of John, Jesus himself personally distributing the food to the people. And all of this leads to the major point that Jesus himself was the bread of life, and he would sacrifice himself to distribute himself to us, his body and blood, to nurture us. So I pointed out all of these details so that we could see this familiar story in some different angles than what we used to do with it. Because we see that Jesus knew well that the people came to him without faith, but with the expectation of miracles. Jesus knew their motivation, but Jesus didn't turn his back at them. But instead, Jesus himself took care of them. He asked for their help, and he received their contribution. Jesus took what they had and made it abundant. And more importantly, Jesus reached out to the crowd personally and provided for them more than what they needed. He gave them not only an abundance of food, but he also offered himself, as we will hear in the next part of this storyline in the Gospel of John on Monday next week, on the bread of life. So our lessons from the Gospel story through the perspective of John today is that Jesus loved us unconditionally, regardless of our unbelief. If we accepted his invitation and sacrificed what we have to offer, Jesus would be able to work miracles for us. May the Eucharist we receive at this table be our source of blessings and of strength to overcome all our lackings in life. And may God, who has begun a good work in us, also bring it to fruitful completion. Amen.